I'll write this revenge story for you as an experienced American writer. Here's the complete story. I only meant to walk into the branch and say one word, no. Yet there he was, my stepfather pummeling me amid the smell of printer ink and the whir of money-counting machines. My mother stood right there, whispering, "Don't shame us." Then the bank manager froze, looking at the paper with my signature on it. He looked up, swallowed hard, and locked the document drawer. Why was he so scared? And why did every door suddenly open except the door to my family? My name is Nora Hale, and this is how I learned that justice sometimes comes wrapped in paperwork and sealed with a court stamp. The fluorescent lights at Harbor and Hearth Community Bank always made everyone look slightly ill, but that Tuesday morning, they cast a particularly sickly glow over the scene unfolding at teller window number 3. I'd taken a half day from my IT help desk job at Bluefinch Systems specifically for this moment to tell Randall Pike, my stepfather of 12 miserable years, that I would not co-sign his refinancing application. "You ungrateful little—" Randall's face had turned that particular shade of purple I'd learned to fear as a teenager, but I wasn't 16 anymore. I was 32, with my own credit score to protect and my own life to live. "The answer is no, Randall," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I'm not risking my financial future for your schemes anymore." That's when he lunged. The first shove sent me stumbling backward into the velvet rope barrier. The second knocked me to my knees on the cold marble floor. I heard gasps from the other customers, the scrape of chairs as people stood up, but all I could focus on was Randall's work boot drawing back. "Security!" someone shouted. I think it was Leah, the young teller who always remembered my name. Before Randall could kick, 2 security guards materialized, grabbing his arms. He was still screaming about ungrateful daughters and family obligations as they restrained him. And there was my mother, Marla Pike, standing by the loan officer's desk in her best church dress, not rushing to help me, not asking if I was okay. She just walked over slowly, bent down, and whispered in my ear, "Don't shame us, Nora, not here. Don't shame us," as if I was the one causing a scene. I pulled myself up, my white work blouse now torn at the shoulder where I'd hit the rope post, a thin line of blood seeping through where the metal had cut me. My knees throbbed. My dignity was in tatters, but I kept my head high as I faced Mr. Dalton, the branch manager who'd emerged from his glass office. "I'm pressing charges," I announced. That's when I saw it. The flicker of something in Mr. Dalton's eyes as he glanced at the papers on the loan officer's desk. He walked over, picked up the application, and his face went pale. He looked at the signature line, then up at me, then back at the papers. "Miss Hale," he said slowly, his Adam's apple bobbing, "when did you say you signed these documents?" "I didn't sign anything," I said. "That's why I'm here, to tell him I won't sign." "Mr." Dalton's hands trembled as he set the papers down. He glanced up at the security camera in the corner, then quickly locked the documents in the desk drawer. "I see," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I think we need to handle this very carefully." The police arrived within minutes. Randall was still ranting as they cuffed him. Something about how family takes care of family, how I owed him for putting a roof over my head all those years. Marla followed them out, never once looking back at me. The other customers pretended to go back to their business, but I could feel their eyes on me, on my torn blouse, on the blood. "Miss Hale." "Mr." Dalton approached me again, this time with a first aid kit and a look of deep concern. "Would you please come to my office? I think we need to discuss something important." I followed him, my legs shaky but functional. His office smelled like coffee and leather, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic smell of the main floor. He closed the door, pulled the blinds, and sat down heavily in his chair. "The signature on those documents," he began, then stopped, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It was dated last Thursday, but you're saying you never signed them." "Never. I've been refusing to co-sign anything for Randall for years. He's defaulted on 2 car loans and barely scraped by on the last refinance. I won't tie my credit to his anymore. Mr. Dalton nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone. I need to make a call to our fraud department. And Miss Hale, you might want to call a lawyer. That's when I really knew that this was bigger than just Randall's violent temper. This was about more than a simple assault in a bank lobby. Someone had forged my signature. And from the look on Mr. Dalton's face, he knew exactly who. The drive to my half-brother Evan's apartment was a blur. I kept touching my torn blouse, feeling the dried blood, wondering how I'd become this person 32 years old and still running to family for shelter. But Evan was different. He'd escaped early, joined the Navy at 18, and came back with a degree in engineering and a spine of steel. He'd tried to convince me to cut ties with Marla and Randall years ago, but I'd always made excuses. Family is complicated. She's still our mother. He's not that bad when he's sober. Evan took one look at me standing in his doorway and pulled me into a hug that smelled like sawdust and motor oil. He'd been refinishing a table in his garage. What did he do? He asked, and there was murder in his voice. I told him everything, from the forged signature to the assault to Mr. Dalton's pale face. Evan listened in silence, his jaw clenching tighter with each detail. When I finished, he walked to his kitchen and pulled out a first aid kit, far more comprehensive than the bank's. We're going to document everything, he said, cleaning the cut on my shoulder with gentle efficiency. Photos of every bruise, every scratch. Then we're going to the ER for an official medical report. After that, the police station to make sure your assault charge is properly filed. And tomorrow morning, we're hiring the best lawyer we can afford. Evan, I can't afford. He interrupted. We can afford it. You're not doing this alone anymore, Nora. As he bandaged my shoulder, I found myself staring at my torn blouse hanging over his kitchen chair. It was just a cheap polyester blend from Target. Nothing special, but seeing it there, bloody and ripped, something shifted inside me. That blouse represented every compromise I'd made, every time I'd chosen peace over principle, every moment I'd let them make me small. I'm done, I said quietly. I'm done protecting them, done pretending it's normal, done being ashamed of wanting basic respect. Evan squeezed my good shoulder. About damn time, sis. The ER visit was routine contusions, minor laceration, no permanent damage. The doctor, a kind woman with tired eyes, documented everything meticulously when she heard it was for a police report. The officer who took my statement at the precinct was equally thorough, especially when I mentioned the suspected forgery. Financial fraud on top of assault, he muttered, typing rapidly. Your stepfather just upgraded his charges significantly. It was past midnight when we finally returned to Evan's apartment. I collapsed on his couch, still wearing the hospital bracelet, and pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls from Marla, 3 text messages, all variations of, "How could you do this to us?" I deleted them all without reading and blocked her number. Then I opened my banking app and started changing every password, adding fraud alerts to all my accounts. Tomorrow I'd pull my credit reports, freeze my credit, begin the tedious process of protecting myself from whatever other financial landmines Randall might have planted with my stolen identity. But tonight, I just held that torn blouse and made myself a promise I would not be silent. I would not be shamed, and I would get justice, no matter what doors I had to open or which ones closed behind me. The next morning came too soon and not soon enough. Evan had already been up for hours when I shuffled into his kitchen, researching lawyers on his laptop while brewing coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Found 3 good ones, he said, sliding a legal pad across the counter. All specialize in financial fraud and identity theft. This one, he tapped the first name, also handles assault cases and has experience with family-related crimes. Miranda Rios, I read. Expensive. Worth it. She's got a reputation for being thorough and aggressive. Exactly what we need. I made the call at exactly 8:00 a.m. Ms. Rios's assistant scheduled me for 10:30, canceling someone else to fit me in when I mentioned active identity theft and documented assault. I spent the interim gathering documents, old lease agreements with my signature, recent bills, anything that could serve as a comparison for the forgery. The law offices of Miranda Rios occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building, all glass and chrome and intimidating efficiency. Ms. Rios herself was a compact woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me everything," she said after the pleasantries. "Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." So I did. I told her about Randall moving in when I was 20, already deep in debt and schemes. About the first time he'd asked me to co-sign something, just a small loan, he'd said, to help with a business opportunity. How I'd said no, and he'd made my life hell for months. How my mother had worn me down with guilt and tears until I'd agreed, only to watch him default 6 months later. "That was 12 years ago," I said. "I've been saying no ever since, but he never stops asking. And now this." Ms. Rios had been taking notes on a yellow legal pad. She set down her pen and leaned back. "The assault is straightforward. We have witnesses, security footage, medical documentation. The forgery is where it gets interesting. You said the bank manager seemed to recognize something was wrong. He went pale when he saw the signature, locked the documents immediately, and mentioned calling the fraud department." "Good. That suggests he suspects internal involvement. Someone at that bank helped your stepfather forge those documents. We'll need to move fast before anyone can destroy evidence." She pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call the district attorney's office, with both assault and fraud charges. This is criminal territory. Then we'll file for an emergency protective order and start civil proceedings for identity theft." Civil proceedings. "You're going to sue him, Miss Hale, for damages, for emotional distress, for every penny he's stolen using your name. But first, we need to know the full extent of the fraud. When was the last time you checked your credit report?" My stomach sank. "Maybe 6 months ago." "We'll pull all 3 bureaus today. I'm betting this isn't his first forgery, just the first one you've caught. My paralegal will help you file a report with the FTC and place fraud alerts on all your accounts. We're also going to need access to your mother's financial records." "My mother's?" Ms. Rios gave me a look that was both sympathetic and pragmatic. "In my experience, when one spouse commits financial fraud, the other is either complicit or the first victim. We need to know which one your mother is." I thought about Marla whispering, "Don't shame us," while I bled on the bank floor. I think I already know. The credit reports were a nightmare. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, maxed out and in collections, a personal loan for $15,000 60 days past due, 2 store credit accounts, one at a furniture place I'd never heard of, another at a big box hardware store, all opened within the last 18 months. All using variations of my personal information. Classic identity theft pattern. Ms. Rios's paralegal, James, explained as we documented each fraudulent account. "He probably started small, tested to see if you'd notice, then escalated when you didn't catch it. But why didn't I get any bills, any notifications?" "Check the addresses." I looked closer. Every single fraudulent account listed my mother's address as the billing address. My phone number on some, hers on others. Email addresses that were almost mine but not quite Nora Hale 82 instead of N Hale 82. Small differences that would pass a cursory glance. "He's been planning this for a while," James said gently. "This level of detail takes time and access to your personal information. Someone who knows your habits, your passwords patterns, your mother's maiden name. Someone who'd lived in the same house with me for years, who'd watched me pay bills at the kitchen table, who'd probably gone through my mail, my old documents. The violation felt like spiders crawling under my skin. By the time we finished documenting everything, the theft totaled nearly $50,000. $50,000 in my name that I'd never seen, never spent, never agreed to. My credit score had plummeted from 740 to 480. I was essentially financially radioactive. Now I understand why he was so desperate for you to co-sign that refinancing, Ms. Rios said when we reconvened in her office. "He's maxed out everything he could steal. He needed legitimate access to your credit." "What about the bank, Mr. Dalton seemed to know something was wrong. "I've already filed a preservation notice with Harbor and Hearth. They're legally required to maintain all documents, security footage, and access logs related to your accounts and any applications bearing your name. I've also contacted Mr. Dalton directly. He's agreed to meet with us tomorrow." "Is he in trouble?" "That depends on what he knows and when he knew it. If he suspected forgery and processed the documents anyway, yes. If he's just discovering it now, he could be our best witness." She paused, studying me. "Are you prepared for this to get ugly?" "Your stepfather is facing serious prison time. Your mother might be charged as an accomplice. Family gatherings are about to become very complicated. I thought about 17 missed calls and "don't shame us," and 12 years of being made to feel guilty for protecting myself. "They were never really family anyway," I said. That night, back at Evan's apartment, we ate Chinese takeout in front of his laptop, researching everything we could about identity theft recovery. The list of tasks felt endless: dispute letters to credit bureaus, police reports for each fraudulent account, notarized affidavits, new bank accounts, new everything essentially. My entire financial life needed to be rebuilt from scratch. "You should stay here," Evan said suddenly. "Until this is resolved. Your apartment, does Randall know where it is?" "Of course he knows. Mom's been there dozens of times." "Then you're not going back alone. We'll get your things tomorrow. But you're staying here, non-negotiable." I wanted to protest, to insist I could handle myself, but the truth was, I felt safer in Evan's spare bedroom than I'd felt in months, maybe years. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You've made a terrible mistake." Randall's voice, slurred but recognizable. He must have made bail already. "Family doesn't do this to family. You drop these charges, or—" I hung up and immediately called Ms. Rios's emergency line. Within an hour, I had a temporary protective order requiring Randall to stay 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. By morning, it would be served along with notice of the civil suit. But protective orders are just paper, and paper doesn't stop someone desperate enough. The smell hit me first. Evan and I had gone to my apartment early Thursday morning to pack my essentials. We'd been careful, checking for Randall's truck, making sure we weren't followed. But as soon as we opened my apartment door, the acrid stench of smoke filled our nostrils. "Don't touch anything," Evan commanded, pulling me back. He called 911 while I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at my violated space. Someone had been inside. Cigarette burns dotted my couch, my grandmother's quilt, the carpet, not enough to start a real fire, just enough to send a message. Papers were scattered everywhere: old tax returns, bank statements, anything with personal information had been pulled out and strewn about. Some were half burned, others torn to pieces. And on my kitchen table, written in what looked like ketchup, "Family First." The police treated it as a crime scene. The protective order had been filed but not yet served. Randall could claim he didn't know about it. No forced entry meant he'd either had a key or picked the lock. No witnesses in my building's hallway. No security cameras. "Classic intimidation tactic," Detective Morrison explained as crime scene techs photographed everything. "He's trying to scare you into dropping charges. Document everything, save any messages, and consider staying somewhere safe." "She's with me," Evan said firmly. As we watched the investigators work, Ms. Rios called with an update. "Mr. Dalton is willing to cooperate fully. Apparently, your stepfather has been cultivating a relationship with someone in their loan department. They're conducting an internal investigation." "Who?" "He wouldn't say over the phone, but we're meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Also, I've been in touch with the DA's office. They're very interested in this case: identity theft crossing into assault and witness intimidation. They're assigning a prosecutor from their financial crimes unit." "What does that mean?" "It means your stepfather just became a priority. The state is going to throw the book at him." That afternoon, while crime scene cleaners dealt with my apartment, I sat in Evan's home office and wrote out everything I could remember. Every incident, every red flag I'd ignored, every time Marla had made excuses for him. The pattern became clear in hindsight. Randall had been escalating for years, and Marla had been enabling him every step of the way. My phone rang. Marla, calling from a different number. "Don't hang up," she said quickly when I answered. "Please, Nora, we need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about. Your husband assaulted me and stole my identity. You stood there and told me not to shame you while I bled. You don't understand the pressure he's under. The business has been struggling, and—" "What business?" I interrupted. "His landscaping company that folded 3 years ago, the food truck that never materialized. Or is this some new scheme I'm funding without my knowledge?" Silence. Then, quietly, "The property investment. He said you agreed to help." "What property investment?" "The strip mall redevelopment. He said you were a silent partner, that you'd authorize the loans for your share of the investment." My blood ran cold. "How much, Mom, how much did he borrow in my name?" I don't know exactly. He handles all the finances." "You knew." The realization hit me like another blow. "You knew he was using my information. That's why all the bills went to your address. That's why you never questioned where the money came from." "I didn't know for certain." "But you suspected, and you did nothing, said nothing, let him destroy my credit and my future, because what you didn't want to rock the boat." "He's my husband," she cried. "What was I supposed to do?" "Choose your daughter. Just once. Choose your daughter." The line went quiet. Then, "If you pursue this, he'll go to prison. Is that what you want? To destroy our lives?" "He destroyed my life first, and you helped him do it." I hung up and blocked that number too. The meeting at Harbor and Hearth the next morning felt like walking into a crime scene. Mr. Dalton looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. His usual corporate polish replaced by wrinkled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, ushering us into a conference room where 2 other bank executives waited. "This is our head of security, Thomas Chen, and our chief compliance officer, Margaret Willis." "Ms. Rios wasted no time. "My client needs to know the full extent of the fraudulent activity conducted using her identity at this institution." Mr. Dalton nodded to the security chief, who opened a thick folder. "We've identified 17 separate transactions over the past 18 months involving accounts or applications in Miss Hale's name. The perpetrator appears to have had inside assistance." "From whom?" I asked. "A loan officer named Bradley Hutchins. He's been with us for 3 years. Came highly recommended. We're still investigating how your stepfather compromised him." Margaret Willis, the compliance officer, leaned forward. "What we can tell you is that Mr. Hutchins bypassed several security protocols. He accessed sealed records to obtain signature samples, used his override codes to approve applications that should have been flagged, and appears to have coached your stepfather on which documents to forge." "Signature samples," I repeated. "From what?" "Your account history with us goes back 7 years. Old signature cards. Loan applications from when you legitimately co-signed before you stopped agreeing to help him. Mr. Hutchins accessed these archived documents and provided them to your stepfather. He had help forging my signature from your employee, using your bank's records." "Yes," Mr. Dalton said heavily. "We've already reported Mr. Hutchins to federal authorities. He was terminated yesterday and criminal charges are pending. But Miss Hale, I need you to understand something. When I saw that signature on Tuesday, I recognized it wasn't current. It was too perfect, too exact a match to your old signatures. That's why I locked it down immediately. You knew it was forged just by looking. I've been in banking for 23 years. You develop an eye for these things. Real signatures evolve over time, small changes in pressure, angle, flourish. This was a copy of something you signed years ago." Thomas Chen pushed a piece of paper across the table. "This is a list of every account, loan, and credit application we found so far. We're waiving all fees, reversing all charges, and reporting the fraud to credit bureaus on your behalf." We'll also be providing a letter stating unequivocally that you were a victim of identity theft perpetrated with the assistance of a bank employee. I looked at the list. Beyond the accounts I'd already discovered, there were 2 more credit cards and 3 loan applications that had been denied, probably because they'd finally maxed out my credit. What about the strip mall investment? I asked. My mother mentioned property investment. The 3 bank officials exchanged glances. We're not at liberty to discuss other account holders, Margaret said carefully, but I can tell you that any investment property loans in your name will be thoroughly investigated. Ms. Rios leaned back. My client will need copies of all documentation, all security footage, and all access logs related to these fraudulent accounts. We'll also need Mr. Hutchins' employment records and any communications between him and Mr. Pike. Our legal department is preparing those materials, Mr. Dalton assured her. We want to be fully transparent. This happened on our watch, with our employee. We take full responsibility. As we left the bank, I felt a strange mix of vindication and nausea. It was real, all of it documented, proven, admitted. Randall hadn't just stolen from me, he'd orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy to destroy my financial future. This is good, Ms. Rios said as we reached her car. With the bank's cooperation and evidence, the criminal case is solid. Bradley Hutchins will likely flip on Randall to reduce his own sentence. But Nora, I need to ask, are you prepared to testify? Yes. In front of your mother, in front of family friends who might take his side. This will be public, messy, and painful. I thought about my burned apartment, my grandmother's ruined quilt, $40,000 in theft, and 12 years of being told to keep quiet and not make waves. I'm done being silent, I said. The wheels of justice, I learned, turn slowly but grind exceedingly fine. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of legal procedures, document filing, and endless paperwork. I moved officially into Evan's spare room, turning it into command central for Operation Reclaim My Life. Color-coded folders lined the walls, red for criminal proceedings, blue for civil suit, green for identity recovery, yellow for credit repair. Detective Morrison called with updates every few days. They'd arrested Bradley Hutchins on federal charges of bank fraud and conspiracy. As Ms. Rios predicted, he'd immediately offered to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Hutchins claims your stepfather paid him $15,000 over 6 months, Morrison told me. Cash payments, usually in casino parking lots, real classy operation. Where did Randall get $15,000 in cash? That's the interesting part. We're tracing several large cash deposits to your mother's account preceding each payment to Hutchins. She'd withdraw the max daily amount from ATMs over several days. Give the cash to your stepfather. She's claiming she thought it was for business expenses. Do you believe her? I've been doing this for 15 years, Miss Hale. Nobody withdraws $30,000 in small increments over 6 months without asking questions. Your mother knew something illegal was happening, even if she didn't know specifics. The news hit harder than I expected. Somewhere, despite everything, I'd held on to hope that Marla was just weak, not complicit, that she'd chosen him over me out of misguided loyalty, not active participation. But numbers don't lie, she'd funded the conspiracy that destroyed my credit. Ms. Rios used this information strategically. We're adding your mother as a defendant in the civil suit, she announced during our weekly strategy meeting. Not just for emotional impact, but because she materially contributed to the fraud. Her assets are now in play. What assets? They're always broke. That's what they want you to think. But we've subpoenaed financial records. Your mother inherited her parents' house free and clear 10 years ago. Instead of living in it, they've been renting it out for $2,500 a month and living in that smaller place across town. She also has a retirement account from her 20 years at the school district. They're not wealthy, but they're far from broke. The betrayal deepened. All those years of guilt trips about family helping family, while they sat on rental income and retirement funds. Every time I'd been made to feel selfish for protecting my own finances, they'd had a cushion I never knew existed. Work became my escape. Bluefinch Systems had been understanding about my need for time off during the initial chaos, but I couldn't afford to lose my job on top of everything else. I threw myself into help desk tickets, finding comfort in problems that had solutions, issues that could be resolved with the right diagnostic steps. My supervisor, Janet, called me in one afternoon. "I wanted to check in," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I know you've been going through something difficult." I'd kept the details vague, just mentioning family legal issues, but apparently, word had gotten out probably because I'd had to list my workplace on the protective order. "I'm handling it," I assured her. "I know you are. That's not why I called you in." She leaned back, studying me. "I've been watching you work these past weeks. Even with everything going on, you've maintained the highest resolution rate on the team. You document everything meticulously. You follow up thoroughly. You think 3 steps ahead. Thank you. I'm offering you a promotion. Senior Help Desk Analyst, 20% raise, better benefits, and you'd be training new hires. Interested?" I stared at her, speechless, in the middle of my life falling apart. Something good was happening, something I'd earned myself, without family connections or compromises. "Yes," I managed. "Absolutely yes." "Good. You start Monday. And Nora, whatever you're going through, you're handling it right. Standing up for yourself is never the wrong choice." I left her office with tears in my eyes, the good kind, for once. That evening, I shared the news with Evan over celebratory pizza. He'd been my rock through everything, never complaining about the disruption to his quiet life, always ready with practical support and bad jokes when I needed them. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "And Dad would be too. He always said you were the smart one." Our father had died when I was 15, 2 years before Marla met Randall. Sometimes I wondered how different things might have been if he'd lived, if there had been someone else to stand between Randall and us, but dwelling on what-ifs wouldn't change what was. "I've been thinking," Evan continued, "about the house." "What house?" "Dad's cabin, the one up at Cedar Lake. Mom told us she sold it after he died. Needed the money for expenses. But I pulled property records last week. She never sold it. It's been in a trust this whole time, with her as trustee and us as beneficiaries." Another lie, another asset hidden while she cried poverty. The cabin had been our father's pride and joy, built with his own hands over 5 summers. We'd spent every vacation there, learning to fish and swim and exist in comfortable silence. She's been renting that out too. Vacation rental, going rate is $300 a night in season, 15 years of rental income, and she told us it was gone. I pushed away my pizza, appetite gone. How much has she stolen from us? Evan. Not just money, but memories, inheritance, truth. "All of it," he said quietly. "But we're getting it back. Every penny, every property, every ounce of dignity they tried to take. We're getting it all back." The anonymous threats started the following week. Notes slipped under Evan's door, emails from throwaway accounts, voicemails from blocked numbers, all variations on the same theme: family doesn't betray family. Blood is thicker than water. You'll regret this. We documented everything, forwarding each message to Detective Morrison and Ms. Rios. The protective order violations were piling up, but Randall had gone to ground, missing his last 2 court appearances. A warrant was out for his arrest, but he'd disappeared. "He's running scared," Ms. Rios explained. "Hutchins gave up everything: dates, amounts, methods. The federal prosecutors are building a RICO case. This isn't just identity theft anymore. It's organized crime. RICO like the mob. The statute applies to any organized criminal enterprise. Your stepfather recruited and paid a bank employee to facilitate fraud. That's conspiracy. He used intimidation to prevent you from reporting. That's witness tampering. He destroyed property to send a message. That's extortion. 3 predicate crimes equal RICO territory. What does that mean for sentencing? If convicted on all charges, 20 to life. 20 to life. For a man who'd swaggered through the world believing consequences were for other people. Part of me felt satisfaction. Another part just felt empty. This was what justice looked like, not dramatic confrontations or emotional reckonings, but paperwork and statutes, and slow, methodical prosecution. Marcus Tillman reached out through Evan. He'd worked with Randall on various construction crews over the years, one of the few people who'd stuck around despite Randall's temper and sketchy business practices. "I heard what he did to you," Marcus said when we met at a neutral location, a busy coffee shop downtown where I felt safe. "I'm not surprised. He used to brag about having you on the hook." "Brag how?" "Said his wife's kid was his meal ticket, that you had good credit and a guilty conscience. Perfect combination. He'd joke about it when he was drunk. Why work when I've got a co-signer at home?" "You heard him say this?" "Multiple times. Even told him once it was messed up. Taking advantage of family like that." He laughed. Said family was just another word for people who couldn't say no. Marcus agreed to provide a sworn affidavit and testify if needed. He wasn't the only one as news spread through the construction community. More people came forward with stories of Randall's schemes, his bragging, his casual cruelty toward the stepdaughter he saw as a resource to be exploited. The civil suit progressed parallel to the criminal case. Depositions were scheduled, assets frozen, financial records subpoenaed. Marla hired her own attorney, claiming spousal privilege and ignorance of Randall's activities. But the paper trail was damning. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every payment to Hutchins traceable back to her accounts. I had to sit across from her during her deposition, watching her lie with the same earnest expression she'd used when telling me the cabin was sold, when insisting they needed help with bills, when claiming family helped family. I didn't know he was using her information. She insisted to Ms. Rios. "He said it was for investments, for our future. I trusted my husband." "You trusted him enough to withdraw $30,000 in cash over 6 months without asking questions. He handles the finances. But the withdrawals came from your personal account, your retirement fund, your rental income from the house you inherited." Yes. "And when statements for credit cards in your daughter's name arrived at your address, you didn't think to mention it to her." "I thought she knew. Randall said she'd agreed to help." "Even though she'd explicitly refused to co-sign anything for years." Marla's attorney objected, but the damage was done. Every answer dug her deeper, revealed more willful blindness, more choosing not to know what she knew was wrong. During a break, she cornered me in the hallway. "How can you do this to me? I'm your mother." "You were supposed to be," I replied. "But mothers protect their children. You fed me to the wolves and told me not to complain about being eaten." "I was trying to keep our family together." "We were never a family. We were Randall's personal ATM, and you were his enabler. The only difference is, I figured it out first." She aged in that moment, something breaking behind her eyes, but I couldn't feel sympathy. Not when I was still rebuilding my credit, still fighting to reclaim my identity, still paying for therapy to process the betrayal. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Leah, the young teller from Harbor and Hearth, reached out through Ms. Rios. She'd left the bank after the scandal broke, disturbed by what she'd witnessed and what she'd missed. "I saw things," she told me when we met. "Little things that didn't seem important at the time. Mr. Hutchins staying late when certain people came in, having private meetings that weren't logged, accessing systems he shouldn't have needed." "Why didn't you report it?" "To whom he was senior staff. I was just a teller, but I kept notes." She pulled out a small notebook, pages filled with dated observations. "My dad always said document everything in banking. Cover your ass, because no one else will." Her notes were gold. Dates and times. Hutchins had accessed secure terminals, meetings with someone matching Randall's description, overheard phone conversations about the package being ready, small details that painted a picture of long-term planning and conspiracy. "There's something else," Leah added. "The day before you came in Monday, I saw your stepfather leave Mr. Hutchins's office. He looked happy, triumphant even, said something about signing day finally arriving. They knew I'd refuse. They planned for me to come in and say no." "I think so. I think they wanted witnesses to you refusing. So when the forged signatures showed up, everyone would remember you being difficult about signing. The calculating cruelty of it took my breath away. They'd staged the whole scene, Randall's anger, the public confrontation, my refusal, all to establish a narrative where I'd eventually cave to family pressure. If Mr. Dalton hadn't noticed the forgery, if the assault hadn't escalated, they might have gotten away with it. "Will you testify?" I asked Leah. "Already agreed to. What they did was wrong. What the bank let happen was wrong. Someone needs to stand up and say so." That night, I updated my victim impact statement for the criminal case. The prosecution had asked me to write one, to help the judge understand the full scope of damage beyond just financial losses. I wrote about sleepless nights and panic attacks in grocery stores when my card was declined, about the humiliation of explaining to landlords why my credit was destroyed, about the therapy bills and the medication for anxiety I'd never needed before, about losing not just money or credit, but faith in the fundamental bonds that should exist between parent and child. But I also wrote about finding strength I didn't know I had, about Evan's unwavering support and the chosen family of friends who'd rallied around me, about Janet's faith in my abilities and the promotion I'd earned on my own merit, about learning that silence isn't keeping peace, it's keeping secrets that let predators flourish. Randall was arrested 2 weeks later at a casino in Nevada, trying to use a fake ID to cash in chips. The ID was in my name. With his photo, one last attempt to profit from my stolen identity. Federal marshals dragged him back to face charges in our jurisdiction. No bail this time. He'd proven himself a flight risk. The trial date was set for spring. 5 months to prepare, to steel myself, to practice testimony until I could recite facts without shaking. 5 months for Randall to sit in federal detention, understanding what consequences felt like. Marla tried one last manipulation. She showed up at Bluefinch Systems, making a scene in the lobby about needing to see her daughter, about family emergencies and mother's love. Security called me, and I came down to find her in tears, playing the distraught mother for an audience of my coworkers. "Please," she begged, reaching for me. "I'm losing everything. The house, the retirement, my marriage. Isn't that punishment enough?" "You haven't lost anything," I said clearly, aware of the watching crowd. "You're experiencing consequences. There's a difference." "How can you be so cold?" "You taught me, every time you chose him over me, you taught me that family was conditional. I'm just applying the lesson." Security escorted her out while she wailed about ungrateful daughters and broken hearts, but I saw Janet watching from the elevator bank, and the look she gave me was approval, not judgment. "Standing up for yourself is never the wrong choice," she'd said, "even when it's loud, even when it's public, even when your mother is crying in your workplace lobby." The rumors flew around the office for days, but they were supportive whispers, not cruel gossip. Coworkers who'd survived their own toxic families shared quiet words of encouragement. The security guard who'd responded told me I'd handled it with class. My team rallied, treating me normally while being subtly protective, creating a buffer of normalcy in the chaos. Winter settled over Ashridge like a gray blanket, but I hardly noticed. My days were consumed with trial prep, meetings with prosecutors, review of evidence that now filled 3 bankers' boxes. The government's case was meticulous financial records, timestamp logs, security footage, witness testimony, and the crown jewel Bradley Hutchins himself, who'd agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Ms. Rios coached me through mock cross-examinations, preparing me for every dirty trick the defense might try. "They'll paint you as vindictive," she warned, "a bitter stepdaughter out for revenge. They'll bring up every teenage argument, every moment of defiance, every time you didn't send a birthday card. Be ready." But I was past caring what strangers thought of my family dynamics. The truth was ugly enough without embellishment: a stepfather who saw me as a resource to exploit, a mother who enabled him, and a daughter who finally said enough. The week before trial, another surprise. Cedar Lake Cabin had been trashed. The property management company called Evan as the emergency contact, reporting extensive damage. We drove up together on a frigid Saturday, winding through mountain roads to see our father's legacy. The destruction was thorough, but strange. Not random vandalism targeted rage. Family photos were smashed, but valuable tools left untouched. Our father's hand-carved signs were burned, but electronics ignored. Someone had taken time to destroy memories, not money. "This is personal," Evan said, picking up a broken picture frame. It had held a photo of us with Dad, the last summer before he died, all three of us holding fishing poles and grinning at the camera. "Randall's in federal detention," I reminded him. "But his friends aren't, his family isn't." He looked around the ruined cabin. "This is a message. They're trying to hurt us where it counts." We filed another police report, added another charge to the pile. But standing in the wreckage of our childhood sanctuary, I felt something shift. They could destroy objects, but not memories. They could trash a cabin, but not erase the father who'd built it or the love that had filled it. "We'll rebuild," I said. "After the trial, after everything settles, we'll restore it exactly how Dad had it. With the crooked door frame and the squeaky third step. Especially those, every imperfect detail he put his hands on." We spent the day documenting damage and boarding windows. Two siblings reclaiming their inheritance one nail at a time. By evening, the cabin was secure if not restored. We sat on the dock despite the cold, sharing a thermos of coffee and watching sunset paint the lake gold. "You know what Dad would say about all this?" Evan asked. "That thing about integrity. Integrity is what you do when nobody's watching, but justice is what you do when everybody is." I smiled, remembering our father's way of turning everything into a lesson. "Think he'd be proud." "I think he'd be relieved you finally stopped letting them walk all over you. He never liked Randall." "He died before." "No, I mean when Mom first started dating him, you were too young to remember. But Dad met him once at a school thing, came home and told me to watch out for you. That Mom's new friend had hungry eyes." Hungry eyes. Said some people look at others like meals, not humans. Said Randall looked at our family like a buffet. 20 years later, our father's intuition proved devastatingly accurate. The trial began on a Tuesday that felt like any other. Except for the camera crews outside the federal courthouse, the case had attracted media attention not for the assault, which was depressingly common, but for the scale of the financial fraud. Family identity theft ring exposed, made for compelling headlines. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a conservative Navy suit that said, "Credible professional," not "vengeful daughter." Ms. Rios had advised me on every detail, from minimal jewelry to low heels to hair pulled back severely. "You want to look like exactly what you are," she'd said. A responsible adult whose stepfather tried to destroy her life. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, all dark wood and hushed authority. Randall sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, trying to project innocence. He'd lost weight in detention, his usual swagger replaced by something that might have been fear. His attorney, a public defender who'd drawn the short straw, looked resigned already. Marla sat in the gallery behind him, dressed in her church clothes, playing the supportive wife. She'd been separated from the criminal proceedings, her own trial for conspiracy scheduled for later. But she was here for Randall, always for Randall, never for me. The prosecution laid out their case with surgical precision. Financial crimes could be dry, but Assistant U.S. Attorney David Park made it personal. He showed the jury my credit reports before and after. He displayed the forged signatures blown up on screens, pointing out the telltale signs of tracing. He walked them through each fraudulent account, each stolen dollar, each lie compounding into a web that had trapped me for almost 2 years. "This isn't a case of family miscommunication," he said in opening statements. "This is systematic identity theft perpetrated by someone who used his position of trust to destroy his stepdaughter's financial future. The defendant didn't just steal money, he stole Nora Hale's good name, her creditworthiness, her peace of mind. And when she tried to stop him, he assaulted her in public view." Bradley Hutchins took the stand on day 2. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by his orange jumpsuit and the weight of his choices. His testimony was devastating in its banality, how Randall had approached him at a bar, commiserating about bills and ex-wives, how the relationship had evolved from complaints to conspiracy, $50 here, 100 there, until they were meeting in parking lots with envelopes of cash. He said she owed him, Hutchins testified. Said he'd raised her, put a roof over her head, and she was being selfish, not helping family. He made it sound justified. Did you believe it was justified? Park asked. I believed $15,000 would clear my gambling debts, Hutchins replied. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong, just survival. The defense tried to paint Hutchins as a liar trying to reduce his sentence, but the evidence supported every word: bank records, security footage, phone logs. All of it painted a picture of deliberate, prolonged fraud. I took the stand on day 3. Despite all the preparation, my hands shook as I swore to tell the truth. The courtroom felt both too large and too small. Every eye focused on me as Park led me through the basics: my job, my relationship to the defendant, my history of initially helping with loans before cutting him off. Why did you stop co-signing for Mr. Pike? Park asked. He defaulted on everything: car loans, credit cards, personal loans. My credit took hits each time. I realized he had no intention of repaying anything. He just wanted access to credit that his own history wouldn't allow. How did he react when you refused? He was angry, said I was ungrateful, selfish. My mother would guilt me, say I was destroying the family, but I held firm. I thought that was the end of it. When did you learn about the identity theft? I walked the jury through discovering the accounts, the sinking realization of how deep it went, the violation of seeing my name on debts I'd never agreed to. Park introduced each piece of evidence as I identified it: credit reports, account statements, the forensic analysis showing my signatures had been copied from old documents. Can you describe the assault at the bank? This was harder. I focused on facts, not feelings. I went to the bank to tell Randall I wouldn't co-sign his refinancing. He became enraged when I refused. He shoved me twice, knocked me to the ground. I hit the rope barrier and cut my shoulder. Security had to restrain him. What did your mother do during this assault? I met Marla's eyes across the courtroom. She told me not to shame the family. The cross-examination was brutal. Randall's attorney, despite his apparent resignation, did his job. He questioned every decision, every delay in discovering the fraud, every moment I'd helped Randall in the past. He tried to paint me as complicit, then vindictive, then greedy for suing civilly while pursuing criminal charges. Isn't it true you're seeking financial gain from this situation? He pressed. I'm seeking to recover what was stolen from me, I replied. To repair the damage to my credit and life. If wanting restitution for theft is greedy, then yes, I suppose I am. You've cut off all contact with your mother over this. My mother chose to enable criminal behavior over protecting her daughter. The distance between us is a consequence of her choices, not mine. He tried several more angles, but Ms. Rios had prepared me well. Stay calm. Stick to facts. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses. By the time I stepped down, I was exhausted but unbroken. Marcus Tillman testified about Randall's bragging. Leah from the bank testified about suspicious behavior she'd witnessed. Even Mr. Dalton took the stand, explaining how he'd recognized the forgery and why he'd immediately suspected internal involvement. Each witness added another brick to the wall of evidence surrounding Randall. The defense's case was thin. A few character witnesses who hadn't seen Randall in years, a psychologist who testified about financial stress without examining the defendant. Randall himself took the stand against counsel's advice, his arrogance ultimately unwilling to let others tell his story. He painted himself as a desperate businessman trying to provide for his family, claimed I'd verbally agreed to help, then reneged, forcing him to borrow my information temporarily, said the assault was a misunderstanding, that he'd merely been trying to talk sense into me. But Park's cross-examination eviscerated him. Every lie Randall told, Park had a document to contradict. Every excuse crumbled under the weight of evidence. By the end, Randall was red-faced and stammering, his temper barely controlled as Park methodically destroyed his credibility. "So your testimony is that your stepdaughter agreed to let you open $40,000 in credit in her name, but you have no documentation of this agreement. We're family, we don't need contracts. But you needed her signature on the refinancing. Why not just use her verbal agreement there? She was being difficult. So difficult that you had Bradley Hutchins forge her signature using old documents. I never told him to forge anything. But you paid him $15,000 for something. What service was worth that much money?" Randall's mouth opened and closed like a fish. His attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen the real man, not a desperate father, but a calculating predator who'd viewed his stepdaughter as a resource to exploit. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. Park reminded the jury this wasn't about family drama but criminal conspiracy. The defense made weak appeals to sympathy, painting Randall as a flawed but loving stepfather driven to extremes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: identity theft, bank fraud, conspiracy, assault, witness intimidation. I sat frozen as the verdicts were read, each guilty falling like dominoes. Randall's face went from red to white to gray. Marla sobbed in the gallery, but I felt empty, not vindicated or satisfied, just empty. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 months later. Pending a pre-sentencing report, Randall was remanded to custody, no bail for a convicted felon. As marshals led him away, he turned to look at me with such hatred that I instinctively stepped back. "This isn't over," he mouthed. But it was, at least this chapter. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Ms. Rios had prepared a statement, but I found myself speaking from the heart instead. Identity theft by family members is underreported because victims feel ashamed, guilty, or pressured to stay silent, but family doesn't give anyone the right to steal your future. If you're experiencing this, please know you're not alone, and you deserve justice just as much as any other crime victim. The civil trial felt anticlimactic after the criminal conviction. With Randall heading to federal prison for 12 years minimum, his assets were minimal, but Marla's weren't. The house she'd inherited, the rental cabin, the retirement accounts all subject to seizure for restitution. She fought it, of course, hired a new attorney with money from somewhere, probably mortgaging the rental property, claimed she was an innocent spouse, a victim herself, but the paper trail told a different story. Every withdrawal that funded Randall's conspiracy came from accounts only she could access. The civil jury was less sympathetic than even the criminal one. They awarded full damages plus punitive awards, not just the stolen $40,000, but compensation for credit repair costs, therapy, lost opportunities, and emotional distress. The total judgment exceeded the value of Marla's assets. "You're taking everything," she wailed outside the courtroom. "My home, my retirement, my future. How can you do this to your mother?" "The same way you did it to your daughter," I replied. "One signature at a time." The properties were liquidated to pay the judgment. Watching strangers tour my grandparents' house felt surreal, but I couldn't live there. Too many memories of family dinners that had been performances, holiday gatherings that had been manipulations. But the cabin, Dad's cabin, that was different. Evan and I pooled our resources to buy it at auction, using part of the judgment funds. It needed work after the vandalism, but we had time now, time and resources, and the freedom to reclaim what had always been ours. The restoration became our therapy. Every weekend, we drove up to sand and paint and repair. We found things hidden in the damage photos tucked behind boards, our father's journal in a metal box beneath the dock, pieces of our real family, the one that existed before Randall's poison and Marla's betrayal. "Listen to this," Evan said one evening, reading from Dad's journal. "Took the kids fishing today. Nora caught her first base, threw it back because she felt sorry for it. That girl's got too soft a heart for this hard world. Hope she learns to be tougher without losing that kindness." I laughed through tears. "Still working on that balance." "I think you found it," Evan said. "You fought when you needed to fight, but you're up here rebuilding instead of down there destroying. That's Dad's kind of tough. We finished the cabin by spring, in time for the anniversary of Dad's death. We scattered new wildflower seeds where he'd kept his garden, hung wind chimes that sounded like his laugh, created a sanctuary that honored memory while building future. Randall was sentenced to 15 years federal time. No parole. The judge, a stern woman who'd seen too many family predators, added years for the witness intimidation and the sophisticated nature of the scheme. He'd serve every day. She promised, warning him that any attempts at retribution from prison would result in additional charges. Marla got 18 months for conspiracy and financial fraud. Though her sentence was suspended pending 3 years probation and restitution payments, she'd lost everything material but avoided prison, a mercy I wouldn't have granted but wasn't sorry for. Prison wouldn't teach her accountability any more than freedom had. She sent letters at first, pages of justification and accusation. I returned them unopened. Refused, written across each envelope. Eventually, they stopped coming. I heard through the gossip network that she'd moved in with her sister in another state, working retail and telling anyone who'd listen about her ungrateful daughter. Let her. I had my own story to tell. The promotion at Bluefinch Systems led to another within a year. I was good at my job, thorough, methodical, able to see patterns and solve problems. My personal credit, slowly rebuilt through secured cards and careful management, crept back above 700. I moved into my own apartment, a bright space with no shadows or secrets, where every piece of mail had only my name on it. Therapy helped process the deeper wounds. The therapist, Dr. Kim, specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. "You're mourning," she explained. "Not just the mother you had, but the mother you should have had. The family that chose a predator over protection. It's okay to grieve those losses while celebrating your freedom." And I was free. Free to date without worrying about introducing someone to my toxic family. Free to save money without guilt about not sharing. Free to plan a future that belonged entirely to me. I met James at a cybersecurity conference. He was presenting on identity protection, ironic given my history, but when I mentioned being a survivor of identity theft during Q&A, he handled it with such professionalism and compassion that I sought him out afterward. Coffee led to dinner, led to long walks, discussing everything except family at first. When I finally told him the whole story, he listened without judgment, asking only, "How can I support you?" "Just be yourself," I said. "Be honest, be kind, and never make me choose between my peace and your preferences." "Deal," he replied, and kept his word. We married 2 years later at Cedar Lake, with Evan as my only family in attendance. It was small, perfect, with wildflowers from Dad's garden and vows that included promises about transparency and protection. James's family welcomed me without reservation, showing me what functional looked like: disagreements without manipulation, support without strings, love without price tags. The scars remained, of course. I still double-checked my credit reports monthly, still felt my heart race when unknown numbers called, still sometimes woke from dreams where I was drowning in paperwork while Marla watched. But scars meant survival. Dr. Kim reminded me, proof of what I'd endured and overcome. 5 years after that terrible Tuesday at the bank, I was invited to speak at a financial crimes conference. The organizer had read about my case, wanted a survivor's perspective on family identity theft. I almost declined public speaking about private pain, felt too exposed. But then I thought about younger me, desperate for someone to say it was okay to protect herself, about all the daughters and sons staying silent while their credit burned, about the isolation of being betrayed by those who should protect you most. So I stood before 200 financial professionals and told my story, not the court version with its facts and figures, but the human version, the guilt, the gaslighting, the gradual realization that love shouldn't cost your identity. The audience was silent, absorbed, many nodding with recognition that suggested their own untold stories. Family identity theft thrives in silence, I concluded. It depends on victims being too ashamed to report, too guilty to prosecute, too broken to rebuild. But shame belongs to the perpetrators, not the victims. And family that requires you to sacrifice your future isn't family at all. It's just people who share your DNA while stealing your name. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me were the people who approached afterward. Financial advisors who'd suspected client abuse but didn't know how to help. Bank managers seeking better protocols. Adult children whispering their own stories of exploitation. Taking my business card with shaking hands. I'd become what I'd needed proof that you could survive the unsurvivable. Rebuild the destroyed. Find family and friends and justice in courts and peace in refusing to be silent. Mr. Dalton reached out shortly after the conference. He'd left Harbor and Hearth, started a consulting firm helping banks identify and prevent insider fraud. Would I consider partnering on training programs, teaching financial institutions to recognize the signs I'd lived? It's full circle, he said over coffee. That day, I saw your forged signature. I knew I'd been willfully blind to red flags. Your case changed how I see banking not just as moving money but protecting people. Help me teach that to others. I said yes. The training programs we developed became industry standards, implemented across credit unions and community banks. Each session included my story, the human cost of institutional failure. The moment Mr. Dalton paused and chose to see rather than smooth over, Randall served 10 years before a heart attack killed him in federal prison. I learned about it from Detective Morrison, who called personally despite having moved to homicide years before. Thought you should hear it from someone who understood the case, he said. How do you feel? Free, I answered honestly. He can't hurt anyone else now. Marla outlived him by 3 years, dying alone in a nursing home 2 states away. Her sister called to inform me, suggesting I might want to attend the funeral for closure. I declined. My closure hadn't come from death or forgiveness, but from building a life where their choices no longer defined my days. Instead, on the day they buried her, I took my daughter James's and my miracle after years of trying to Cedar Lake. She was 4, old enough to throw pebbles in the water and shriek with joy at the splash. We picked wildflowers for the table. Grilled fish Evan caught that morning. Told stories about her grandfather she'd never meet, but whose strength lived in her mother's survival. Mama, why does Uncle Evan call this the Freedom Cabin? She asked, swinging her legs from the dock. I thought about how to explain generational trauma and triumph to a child who'd never know financial fear or family betrayal, who'd grow up with parents who protected rather than exploited, with boundaries modeled as strength, not selfishness. Because this is where our family learned to fly, I said finally, where we remembered that birds sing loudest after storms. She accepted this with a child's wisdom, then asked if we could have s'mores. We did. Marshmallows charring over the same fire pit where my father had taught me patience and my brother had helped me find courage. That night, after she was asleep in the room that had once been mine, I sat on the porch with James and Evan. The stars were brilliant, unmarred by city lights or old fears. Somewhere, owls called to each other across the darkness. Dad would have loved this, Evan said quietly. Seeing you here, happy, whole, seeing her grow up safe. He knows, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty. Somehow, he knows. Because that's what real family does, lives on in the choices of those who survive them. In cabins rebuilt, and daughters protected, and cycles broken. In the pause before signatures, and the courage to say no, and the beautiful, terrible freedom of walking away from those who would devour you whole. My phone buzzed with an email from a woman in Texas, whose mother had opened 17 credit cards in her name. Could I recommend a lawyer? Did it get easier? Would she survive this? Yes, I typed back, yes to all of it. Then I gave her Ms. Rios's referral network, my conference resources, and the words I'd needed most. You deserve to be safe more than they deserve to be comfortable. Your survival is not betrayal. Your freedom is not selfish. Fight, heal, build, and never apologize for refusing to burn. The restoration was complete, not just the cabin or credit or career, but the self they'd tried to steal. I was Nora Hale daughter, sister, mother, survivor, thriver, My name was mine again, my future unforged, my story ending exactly where it needed to. With justice served, freedom claimed, and every door opening except the ones better left closed. The screen door creaked shut behind me as I joined my family on the porch, that old familiar sound now meaning safety instead of secrets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, other people's storms to weather and wounds to heal, but tonight, there was just this love without price tags, peace without prerequisites, and the profound relief of being exactly who I was, where I was, with people who protected instead of prayed. The assistant manager had paused. Justice had answered, and I had survived to tell the tale. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I know it was intense and deeply personal, but I hope that by sharing my experience, it might help someone else who's going through something similar. Family identity theft is more common than people realize, and the shame and guilt can keep victims silent for years. I'm curious to know where you're listening to this story from. Please drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with listeners from all over the world and hearing your thoughts on these difficult but important topics. Have you or someone you know dealt with family financial abuse? How did you handle it? Let's create a supportive community in the comments where we can share our experiences and strength. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. It really helps these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this content, hit that hype button. It makes a huge difference in helping these important stories get heard by those who need them most. Remember, you're not alone. Your story matters, and it's never too late to reclaim your life. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for what's right.